versus Mike Johnson. Let's bring Lauren Wright in, NewsNation political contributor, scholar and lecturer at Princeton University, and Kurt Bardella, Democratic strategist, NewsNation political contributor as well. So Joe Khalil tells us now it's one bill. We'll see. They need 2/3. Here's the speaker before we start the conversation, his latest comments on all of this.
We have a unified Republican conference. There is a unanimous agreement in the room that we need to move forward. I will not telegraph to you the specific details of that yet because I've got a couple of things I got to wrap up in a few moments upstairs, but I expect that we will be proceeding forward. We will not have a government shutdown, and we will meet our obligations.
Nothing to see here. Everything is solved, or maybe not. It depends the way things have been going this week. Lauren, what do you make of the situation Mike Johnson is in with his caucus and the president-elect and Elon Musk and how he's had to deal with it?
Well, he's on borrowed time. You know, Americans have a limited amount of patience for this. They definitely don't want their travel plans interrupted. They definitely don't want 55% of the DOD to be furloughed. Those are unpopular things. And so he can push this as close to midnight as he wants, but I don't think Johnson would telegraph that he's going to get the deal done if it isn't going to happen. I do think Republicans understand there are political risks here.
And those risks, I think it's fair to say, they're risks for Republicans. I wonder if they're risks for Trump. He might be thinking, Kurt, that he can gain something politically out of this. And I don't know, he might be right. I mean, he and Elon Musk, but Republicans in Congress clearly don't necessarily see it that way. There were 30 some odd, right, that were against Johnson last night. And we'll see tonight. They're not only going to need the Republicans, they'll need a bunch of Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, again, they thought they had a deal when the week began, that we wouldn't even be in this situation that we are now. We're on the fourth iteration of this plan. And as we all found out, it can go sideways with one tweet from someone outside of the federal government system.
Right.
And it's like the first question I have whenever I hear and watch these press statements is, did you run this by Elon Musk and Donald Trump? Because that's really what it comes down to. The minute that they snap their fingers and say, you know what, I said I wanted the debt ceiling passed off in there. It's not in there. I'm against it. Like, we're back to square one. And there are a lot of people on that side of the equation who believe a government shutdown's not a big deal. So why not do it now?
Speaking of Musk, he obviously has an influence over Republicans. Apparently, he's out with a threat. We'll talk about this later in the show to maybe primary even some Democrats with more moderate members. I don't know. But the point is, the guy's the richest guy in the world, right? He's got a lot of money, a lot of resources. Jared Moskowitz was a Democrat and a Doge guy, by the way. I think he was the first Democrat from Florida. He joined up with Doge. Had this to say about Elon. Let's watch.
Elon Musk and Vivek have come up here and spent a lot of time talking to the Republicans. And these are very smart gentlemen. I think what they should take from yesterday is that nothing on a budgetary basis is going to pass here without the Democrats. So perhaps the next time they come to D.C., they should meet with us. Thank you.
Thank you. How about that, Lauren, and this idea that you need both sides, and for all Musk's money, influence, and power, experience in how this Congress works is not necessarily high on his resume, right?
It's absolutely true. And that's what's so interesting about Musk getting involved here is he's not really concerned with the politics of it. He doesn't want to run for office. He's doing other things. And so that's a double-edged sword because on the one hand, he is this really useful, influential outsider who can set the politics aside. And that's what appealed to a lot of voters this last cycle about Trump and about Musk being on board. But on the other hand, once you get into government or you have a hand in it, you do need to work with Democrats. And so the vision and the political reality, if you will, are in tension sometimes. And I think we're just starting to see the tension.
But there's a lot of power there, Kurt. You know, I'm not taking anybody serious that says he's going to be speaker. I mean, who knows the way the world works now? I know that was out there. That's not the thing I'm looking at, but I'm looking at these primary threats and challenges as real for Republicans, maybe also for Democrats. I mean, again, he could fund as many as he wants. What about all the power this one guy has politically? And we're seeing it this week.
Yeah, I mean, this is really the inevitable fallout of the Citizens United decision way back when that opened up the door for basically unlimited amounts of money being, thrown into our political system without accountability, without really a lot of transparency, and it just empowered, the billionaire class to play an outsized role in our political process. And the end result of that is the billionaire class is flexing their muscle. They buy the social media platforms. They buy legacy media platforms. They have government contracts. They fund both sides, in some cases of the equation. And at the end of the day, the American people's interests, I find it hard to believe that the richest people in the world are really looking out for the rest of the 99% of the population.
It's interesting, and Lauren brought this up already, but when you talk about who pays the political price, I think some of it matters in terms of how long a shutdown would be. If it's a few hours or something, we've been through that, probably not a big deal. But if it goes on for a while, you do look around the holidays. This came up at the Pentagon yesterday at, members of the military not getting paid around Christmas. General Ryder at the Pentagon had the following to say.
Military personnel on active duty, including reserve component personnel on federal active duty, would continue to report for duty and carry out their assigned duties. Without an appropriation or a continuing resolution, our troops will miss their end-of-month paycheck during the holiday season. Military reservists drilling after December 20 will not receive pay for those drills, and federal civilians that are required to work during a shutdown will not be paid.
You know who is paid, Lauren, is members of Congress, from my understanding. So I wonder how all of that goes over.
Yes, and the reporting indicates that something that made Trump so upset about this last iteration of the bill was the cost of living raises for congressional reps. I don't think he's on board with that at all. And it's just sort of another example where Trump's not typically ideological. He's not a typical Republican in a lot of ways. And, one example of that is his toughness on these cost of living issues. But then he has these things like, let's get rid of the debt ceiling. Democrats will come on board. They'll work with me on that. He floats that. Then that kind of screws over a lot of Republicans. And so it is just a fresh reminder that there aren't hardline ideologues coming into the White House. There's a lot of fuzziness around the edges here on a lot of these issues.
I mentioned that earlier to Governor Sununu. That might not be a terrible idea, but that's a different issue. Thank you, Lauren. The debt ceiling. Lauren, thank you, and Kurt as well. More to come, though, on this.